Hello everyone, this is Anna from annasays.com, and in this video I wanted to talk about my own process of spiritual awakening. So I've had two spiritual awakenings in my life. The first one happened maybe 20 years ago, or between 15 and 20 years ago, because it was kind of a process that happened over time. And the second one happened in the last couple of years. So I'm going to tell the story in this video of those two awakenings. And if you have been through a spiritual awakening or you're currently going through one, please write a comment for the YouTube video and let me know. Tell the story of what that awakening was like, because I think that spiritual awakenings are really fascinating. Okay, so let's have a look at my first spiritual awakening. So I just want to give you a little bit of context to this story. So I was born in the 1980s in the UK, and I was born into a family that was not very religious or spiritual. My mother was a scientist initially in her career. She did a microbiology degree, so she was very scientifically, that was her way of seeing the world through a scientific lens. My father wasn't particularly religious either. My grandmother was, however, a Christian, and around the age of 10 or 11, I felt this pull towards going to church. And in retrospect, I don't think that I was really looking for Christianity as such. It was more that I was looking for an experience of connecting with the divine or connecting with the mystical aspect of life. So I was a Christian from about the age of 11, and I continued to be a Christian until maybe the age of 19, even though I didn't really relate to the dogma aspect of Christianity. But I was looking for that experience of something mystical. So I stopped being a Christian maybe around the age of 19, and this is when my first awakening began. And it began because, well, there were two things. One of them was that I was attending a Bible study group, and I went to a different church. And it turned out to be an evangelical Christian church, and I didn't really know at the time, but it was an experience that I'd not had before, and I actually found it quite disturbing. There were people there talking in tongues and screaming and falling down, and there was a lot of talk of hell and the devil, and how people that I knew were definitely going to go to hell because they weren't Christians. So it was really off-putting, and really, I found it really scary and quite cultish. So that happened, that made me really doubt whether this was a path that I wanted to continue going down, because I did not think, it just didn't resonate with me, all of that hell and devil and dramatic stuff that I saw in the church and in the Bible study group. So there was that, and then also at the time I went into a bookshop when I was at university, and I went to the Christian section, maybe because I was trying to get some answers or some insights as to how all of this corresponded with what I felt was true, these experiences that I'd had in this evangelical church. And I found a book that was in the Christian section called Conversations with God, and I bought it and I took it home and I started to read it. And it was not, in fact, a Christian book at all. They'd put it in the wrong section. It was a New Age book. It was a spirituality book. And as I was reading it, I just couldn't believe what I was reading, because it resonated with me so much more than anything that I'd learnt in the Christian church. And the idea in it was that we are all a piece of the divine, and that everything in this world is a piece of the divine. So the divine is in everything. And this was a new idea for me, because when you compare it to what Christianity teaches, which is that we are the fallen children of God and that we need saving, and we're kind of these lowly worms who are not really worth anything until we're saved by Jesus. I mean, I haven't studied Christianity for a long time, so that summary of it might not be correct, but that was how I felt about it at the time. That was how I felt about myself. And then I picked up this book and I read it, and it told me that I had a higher self that was divine and that everybody else did too. And this, as I say, this resonated with me so much more than Christianity did. And after that, I left Christianity, much to the consternation of my friends who are in the Bible study group. And they applied a lot of pressure trying to get me to come back. But I didn't. I just decided it wasn't for me, and that I'd found these other ideas that made so much more sense. It was like it really struck a chord within me. It was like there was this part within me that knew what the truth was. And when I read these words, it was like it hit me hard in that place. And I knew that this was something that I believed in. And so it was just the death knell for my Christian beliefs. So that was when I was in my second year at university. And over the next few years, I read psychic books. I read books by Sonia Choquette, by Doreen Virtue. I also read blogs. And at the time, I think it was like 2005, 2006. So it was kind of not really right at the beginning of the internet, but it was the early days of the internet. And so it was amazing to come across certain blogs written by psychics and spiritualists that shared information that I hadn't really come across before about the spirit world, about their experiences of the spirit world and what it was all like. And it just blew my mind, and it kept hitting me in that part of me that I felt could recognize my truth, and it just kept hitting me and saying, yep, this is what I believe. So I graduated in, I think it was 2006, and a couple of years later, I was working in a language school in Spain, in the Spanish Pyrenees. And I think that this was it was my second job that I'd had out of university. And I was pretty unhappy I was teaching English. I was also teaching French to Spanish speakers. And I was just unhappy for various reasons. It just wasn't quite what I wanted to do with my life. And there was this feeling that I knew that there was something different that I was supposed to be doing. I knew there was something more to life than just this job. So I was on this kind of search, or this quest for information and knowledge. And I think it did centre very much around past lives. I had always had a fascination for past lives. And I came across the website of a woman who offered Akashic record readings. And part of the reading was about past lives. Prior to this point, I'd also had a past life reading. I think it was a few years earlier. It wasn't a past life reading, it was a psychic reading. But it had a past life component to it. And when I asked her about my past life, she said to me, the only thing I can tell you is Tuscany in Italy. That's all I can see. So that was all she told me. And then when I came across this woman's website and she was offering Akashic record readings, as I said, that had a past life component, I felt really drawn to it. It was a very expensive reading, so I was a little bit hesitant, but I just kept coming back to it. I just knew that it was my next step. And the night before the reading, I actually had a dream about, of the actual reading, where she was telling me certain things about who I was on the soul level. And the amazing thing was that when I actually had the reading the next day, it was the same as my dream. So the things that I had been told in my dream were things that she told me in the reading. And they weren't general things, they were really specific things that an Akashic record reading goes into, that I now, I do these Akashic record readings for people myself now, and that I go into. So it was quite specific, the information in the dream and the information that I got in my reading that corresponded. So that was really interesting. And I was just blown away by the reading. I thought it was brilliant. It explained so much to me about my life lessons, the things that I'd struggled with, the way that I was feeling. Interestingly, she also told me about a past life that I had in Tuscany, in Italy. And the situation that she told me about from the previous lifetime, I was working as a governess, and I was in a situation that was very similar to the situation that I was in at the time that I had the reading. So obviously in real life I was also working as a teacher. So there were just some parallels. So that was really interesting. So I decided to train with this woman and do her correspondence course, or her online program, to learn to read the Akashic records, and that was over 16 years ago. And one of my first clients at the time was my boss at the language school, because he was really interested in all things psychic and spiritual. And so I did a reading for him. It was not actually, I did an Akashic record reading for him, but I also did a general reading, even though I had no clue how to do it. But the feedback that he gave me about the information that I got was that it really resonated with him, and then he was blown away by the Akashic record reading that I did as well. So all of those experiences, when you put them together, even though I was hesitant and I was doubtful, and I think I was also quite skeptical in some ways, because I had this really analytical side to me as well. But when I put it all together, there were just too many coincidences. The dream, and there was obviously something to it. And there was also an experience that I had around this time that really pushed me over the edge from kind of being unsure to being completely sure that the spirit world was real, that all of this stuff was real. And it was a mediumistic experience that I had. So I was asleep at the time, and this was around 2007. So I was asleep in the accommodation that my boss had provided for me as part of the work arrangement, and I felt this knock on my head, like somebody hit me on the side of my head, and I woke up, and immediately after I woke up I could see in my mind's eye, so it wasn't a spirit that was in front of me, it was in my mind's eye. So when I don't think I even had my eyes closed, it was almost like there was this screen that I could see with my eyes open with this spirit on it. And it was the spirit of a man, and he had dark hair and dark skin. He didn't tell me his name, but he gave me a message, which was, "I'm so glad that your boss took my wife on holiday." I thought, well, this is strange. I didn't know what that was about. And he showed me this image of him in like a caravan or an RV with this woman, and he got out of the RV and disappeared. And then my boss got into the RV with the woman. And he also said to me, "By the way, I built the building that you're living in." So I didn't really know what any of this meant, but I told my boss the next day, and he said it was the spirit of his wife's first husband, who had died of cancer. So she'd been married to this man, and he died really young of cancer. And then she met my boss later. And before he died of cancer, before he had been diagnosed with cancer, they planned to make a trip around North America in an RV or a caravan or whatever, and they couldn't do it because he got cancer, so they never went on that trip. But then when my boss met this woman, they ended up taking the trip together, the trip that she hadn't been able to take with her first husband. She went with her second husband, which was my boss. And my boss also told me that this guy had built the building that I was living in. So he was a builder. He actually built it with, with his own hands. So when I heard this, I was like, I guess all of this stuff is real. The spirit world is real. So that was my first awakening. Okay, so the second awakening that I had, which was a couple of years ago, and this wasn't so much an awakening because I'd already knew the spirit world was real. I've been doing, since that time that I had that first awakening, I've been doing readings, Akashic record readings and other types of readings for people on and off for about 14 years by that point, by the time I had my second awakening. So the second awakening was about my own power to create my reality. So around 2 years ago, kind of building up to 2 years ago, my health started to fail. Maybe around 10, 12 years ago, things started happening that weren't good. I had really bad allergies, really severe allergies that nothing seemed to solve. I developed asthma for the first time as an adult, had all kinds of digestive problems that I hadn't had before. And over the next 10 to 12 years, it just seemed to go downhill. And I got sicker and sicker, even though I was doing things like eating like 10 portions of vegetables a day and living in a healthy way, like exercising and all the rest of it. My health just declined gradually over that period. And it came to a head 2 years ago when I was diagnosed with a really serious autoimmune illness. And it was pretty devastating because it was very debilitating. And when I looked into the prognosis, it wasn't good. Most people who had this diagnosis became disabled and were no longer able to work. And it usually happened after between 5 and 20 years. So people tended to stop working and sort of really struggled and lived half lives from what I could gather. So that was pretty devastating to me, and I was really ill. And then also what I hadn't mentioned was that during that 10 to 12 year period when my health was declining, I had seasonal affective disorder. Actually, I'd had that since the age of 16, so I had winter depression. And that got worse and worse as the years went on. And I also found that I was frequently depressed outside of that winter period. I was also depressed in the summer. So I was really sick with all of those things about 2 years ago. So I felt like I had two choices ahead of me. One of them was that I would accept what had happened and I would decline and just possibly have to give up work because I wasn't able to work at the time. And then the second path that I saw was that I would possibly learn how to heal myself. And I think I was really skeptical of this path. I didn't know that I could heal myself. I knew that I could heal myself emotionally and spiritually because I'd been involved in healing modalities, but I didn't have an understanding of how that could affect my body or how I could make changes to my body, because it seemed to me like the more I lived in a healthy way, the sicker I got. Like the more vegetables I ate, I went on a vegan diet, I was vegetarian, I was, as I say, exercising, I was detoxing, and I was still unhealthy and lacking in energy and depressed. So it seemed to me like the more I did, the worse I got. So yeah, I didn't have an understanding of how I could heal myself physically, and I didn't really believe in it, probably because I'd been raised by somebody who was so scientific and involved in the medical field, and of course conventional medicine teaches us that we cannot heal ourselves, we cannot cure incurable illnesses. So I decided to take that second path of trying to heal myself, and I started off by doing a program called the DNRS program, which was a program that was actually based on spiritual principles, although it was not marketed that way. And it was about focusing on, well, doing positive visualizations every day. It was also about elevating mood throughout the day and interrupting negative thoughts. And basically, it was a program that was based on the law of assumption. And the law of assumption is a philosophy that is kind of similar to the law of attraction, which is something that I had discovered and kind of dismissed about 15 years earlier because I could never get it to work for me. So the law of assumption was a philosophy that was popularized by Neville Goddard, who was an author and a lecturer and a mystic from the 1930s to the 1970s in America. And yeah, I started to look into these law of assumption teachings, and the law of assumption says that what you see in your 3D reality is a product of what is in your subconscious mind. It's what you are subconsciously assuming and believing, and what your identity is. Whereas the law of attraction was more about that you attract based on how you're feeling. So the difference between the law of assumption and the law of attraction was that the law of assumption was more about your world is a reflection of what you are being, what you are embodying in your subconscious and in your energy field. And then, as I said, the law of attraction is more about you attract according to what you feel. So the law of assumption says that if you want to change your 3D reality, then you have to change who you are being. You have to change your identity. You have to change, and then as a result of that, you change your beliefs. Maybe you change your feelings, and you definitely change your thoughts as well. So to give you an example, let's say that you are poor and you don't have enough money, maybe you're in debt. If you want to change your reality according to the law of assumption, you need to embody the reality of somebody who has money. You need to be somebody who has money. So that means that not just that you feel like you have money, but you think thoughts that are in alignment with that, and you change your concept of yourself and your identity. So maybe you affirm things like, I have always been good with money, things like that, to change your identity. So I, at this time, read a lot of books. I read Neville Goddard's books and his lectures, listened to his lectures. I read a really good book by Dr. Joe Dispenza, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which Dr. Joe really does get the teachings of the law of assumption. And I also read books by Joseph Murphy and Vadim Zeland, who is a Russian quantum physicist. So I applied these teachings, and what I found is that they did in fact work, and that it was not a scam, as I had feared when I first discovered these ideas. So in terms of the results that I had, I let go of the seasonal affective disorder, so the winter depression disappeared, and I've had 2 winters with no seasonal depression after having had 22 years of seasonal depression. I stopped having a depression in general. I stopped having depressive symptoms. I no longer had complex post-traumatic stress disorder from my difficult childhood. I suffered with that throughout my life, and I let that go as well. I became asymptomatic in the very serious illness that I had developed a couple of years ago. and I no longer had the allergies that I had suffered from in the past. And also, I think I forgot to mention that I also had really severe asthma that often landed me in the emergency room after a virus. So I know you got asthma after a virus, but it was really debilitating. And that disappeared pretty much as well. So that was my second awakening. An awakening to the idea that I really was the creator of my reality, that I could change who I was being. I could change how I was feeling, how I was thinking. I could change what I was envisioning and imagining in my mind's eye, what I was daydreaming about. And I mean, I make it sound really simple in this video, but I mean, there was a lot of work that I put into it, and I go into that on my blog. I've published lots of articles about it. So if you want to read more about how I did that, you can go to www.annasace.com, and I'll put a link in the description as well, so that you can go and visit my blog and read articles about how the law of assumption works and how you can use it in your favour in this way. So, I mean, both of those awakenings were really exciting, but I think the second one was the most exciting because it was an awakening to my own power. And I realised that I could be what I wanted to be. I could achieve whatever I wanted to achieve, because if I'd achieved this, then that meant that I could achieve other things as well. So yeah, those were my two awakenings. So I hope that you enjoyed listening to the story of my awakenings, and as I said, please share your story if you have had a spiritual awakening or you're currently going through one, as I would love to read about it. Okay, thank you for watching.